Assalamu Alaykum. Inshallah, we'll be starting from Surah 12, verse 39. And inshallah, we will start with reciting A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitani Rajim. I seek refuge in God from Satan that rejected as God has commanded us to do anytime before we recite the Quran in order to understand uh, without any interruption from Satan, so we can get the right meanings. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We are at Surah 12, verse 39. O my prison mates, are several gods better or God alone, the one, the supreme? 1240. You do not worship beside him except innovations that you have made up, you and your parents. God has never authorized such idols. All rulings belongs to God, and he has ruled that you shall not worship except him. This is the perfect religion, but most people do not know. 1241. O my prison mates, one of you will be the wine butler for his Lord, while the other will be crucified. The birds will eat from his head. This settles the matter about which you have inquired. 1242. He then said to the one to be saved, remember me at your Lord. Thus the devil caused him to forget his Lord, and consequently he remained in prison a few more years. So the footnote here for 1242 says, when Joseph begged his companion to intercede with the king on his behalf, he exhibited dependence on other than God to be saved from the prison. This does not befit a true believer, and such a serious slip cost Joseph a few years in the prison. We learn from the Quran that only God can relieve any hardship that might befall us. A true believer trusts in God and depends totally on Him alone. So, Surah verse 15, 617, Surah 8:17, and 10:107 um, confirms that. So, I am gonna go, uh, I will inshallah reflect on these verses first and then proceed further, inshallah. So, as the name says, Joseph, Surah 12 is, God has narrated it as a complete story from the beginning to the end, and this probably is the only surah which is like that. Um, and it has, and God tells us there are many lessons to learn for the believers in this surah. There are different situations, um, and different scenarios, like a story. And then, how if you read a story to a child, and then at the end you ask them questions. So, what did you learn from this story? And God calls uh, Quran the most accurate history. And this chapter um, about Joseph is, once again, as we know, the Quran um, is word to word from God. And now we have a proof of authenticity for the world to know that this is a scripture from God without any doubt, due to the mathematical composition of the Quran that no falsehood could ever enter. So, verse 39, um, while Joseph was in the prison due to a false accusation from governor's wife that he tried to molest her. Um, so, during his prison time, he made some friends in the prison, and he um, he was talking to them, and of course he was gonna Joseph was endowed with knowledge. He was son of a prophet, Jacob, and he was a believer from the very young age, Masha Allah. And he was talking about his progeny, like in verse 38. And I followed instead the religion of my ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We never set up any idols beside God. Such is the blessing from God upon us and upon the people, but most people are unappreciative. And then he goes on, oh, my prison mates, are several gods better, or God alone, the one, the supreme? The next verse also talks about worshiping God alone. So we have to check ourselves, like, that we're not just doing lip service, that there are a lot of innovations that people tend to worship beside God. Um, for example, prophets, saints, many other entities. People, go to some tombs and stuff. Your boss, your money. It can be many gods. And those are, we know that nothing holds power except God alone. Um, and God has never authorized such idols. The verse talks about all ruling belongs to God, and He has ruled that you shall not worship except Him. This is the perfect religion, but most people do not know. Even though there is, people have access to scriptures and it talks about worshiping God alone, but God says most people do not know. It's like in their heart or in their mind, they uphold other idols beside God. And that is, as we know, the idol worship is the only unforgivable sin. If we maintain till death, we will not pass the test of this life. We're only here for a very brief interim to accept God's absolute authority over everything and accept Him as the only one true Lord and Master and submit to Him completely. So if we still have some kind of idols left in our mind or in our ideology, we need to get rid of those as soon as possible. So God had also endowed Joseph with interpretation, the knowledge of interpreting the dreams. And one of the prison mate discussed a dream he had with Joseph, and then he talks on 1241 about that dream, that um, he's describing what is the meaning of this dream. And it's pretty simple. It says that one of you will be the wine butler for his Lord, um, while the other will be crucified. The birds will eat from his head. This settles the matter about which you have inquired. He then said to the one to be saved. Now Joseph makes a mistake here, big time. Um, that one of the prison mate was being released at that time, and Joseph thought, this is a good time that I make him as an intercede on my behalf to the king. Um, so he said, this is all he said to this person who was being released, that remember me at your Lord, you know. And thus the devil caused him to forget his Lord, meaning devil caused Joseph for a moment to forget that only God has the power to for over everything. And then when he will be released or not, he did not need anybody's intercession to get him out of the jail. So the devil caused him to forget his Lord, and consequently he remained in prison a few more years. Now God wanted Joseph to learn a lesson here, that a righteous believer, especially from a progeny of Jacob, it's a lineage which has many prophets and messengers, and that you have to set up an example. You have to be exemplary in your submission and cannot. Mentally, he forgot. He thought this act will make me set. He's gonna go and talk about that I can interpret dreams, and king might, you know, have mercy on me and might have a use for me. So God tells us now, one of the lesson here we learn, very important one, is that we should never ever set up any God with small g or any lords beside God. Always, God tells us in the Quran that when His servants implore Him, He's always listening and responding. No one else can change a condition uh, or anything except God. No one has power over anything. That's what La ilaha illallah means. No other God except God. And we have why it is the main pillar of submission or Islam, that we have to absolutely believe that there is no other God beside God, meaning no other entity has any power. 1243. The king's dream. The king said, I saw 7 fat cows being devoured by 7 skinny cows, and 7 green spikes of wheat and others shriveled. O my elders, advise me regarding my dream, if you know how to interpret the dreams. They said, nonsense dreams. When it comes to the interpretation of dreams, we are not knowledgeable. 1245. The one who was saved from the prison said, now that he finally remembered, I can tell you its interpretation, so send me to Joseph. So now this person realized, you know, Joseph had told him something about interpreting the dream. So the king had this moment where he wanted to know about his dream, and not many people are knowledgeable in that matter to interpret that. So suddenly the need for Joseph comes up, and the 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 king summons Joseph to come to his um, place. Joseph interprets the king's dream. 1246. Joseph, my friend, inform us about 7 fat cows being devoured by 7 skinny cows and 7 green spikes and others shriveled. I wish to go back with some information for the people. He said, 1247, what you cultivate during the next 7 years, when the time of harvest comes, leave the grains in their spikes, except for what you eat. After that, 7 years of drought will come, which will consume most of what you stored for. After that, a year will come that brings relief for the people, and they will once again press juice. The king said, bring him to me. When the messenger came to him, he said, go back to your lord and ask him to investigate the women who cut their hands. My lord is fully aware of their schemes. So this person was sent by the king to ask Joseph to interpret the dream, and he did. Um, that, as you can, these are the about whatever the dream was and interpretation was about. A drought was going to come, and the symbolic image of 7 fat cows were going to eat 7 skinny cows, stuff like that. Anyways, the interpretation uh, was sent to the king, and then the king said, bring him to me. When the messenger came to him, he said, go back to your lord and ask him to investigate the women. So at that time, Joseph reminded this messenger who came from the king to get open the case of that seduction, which was falsely attributed to Joseph, and he was sent to jail innocently. At that time, he asked to, investigate it again. The king said, 1251, the king said to the women, "What do you know about the incident when you tried to seduce Joseph?" They said, "God forbid, we did not know of anything evil committed by him." The wife of the governor said, "Now the truth has prevailed. I am the one who tried to seduce him, and he was the truthful one." So now the finally it had to be this long, this matter to be, it had a predetermined time when the innocence of Joseph was going to be proved. And so when these women who were probably, who knew governor's wife, they testified that Joseph was innocent. And at that time, governor's wife had no choice but to, she had remorse about, and she admitted that it was one who seduced him, not the other way around. 1252. I hope that he will realize that I never betrayed him in his absence, for God does not bless the schemes of the betrayers. 1252. I hope that he will realize uh, I do not claim innocence for myself. The self is an advocate of vice, except for those who have attained mercy from my Lord. My Lord is forgiver, most merciful. So the governor's wife also talks about that she never betrayed her husband in his absence, and she seems like she's remorseful here. And I like this verse, 1253, how it says, "I do not claim innocence for myself. The self is an advocate of vice, except for those who have attained mercy from my Lord. My Lord is forgiver, most merciful." So that, you know, we have to trust God if sometimes situations come that we are really trying to prove, um, like, we're going out of our way to prove a point, or that our innocence in a matter or something. But, we need to trust God that He is the best judge. He is the not only judge, and God says, "Make me your advocate." So um, when there is truth, it prevails. Truth prevails over any falsehood, basically. And we should trust God and always implore Him to help us if we ever find ourselves in a situation, and don't need to be um, advocate for ourselves too much. It says the self is an advocate of vice, because self is basically our ego, you know, and it might not, it might betray us sometime. I don't know if I'm making any sense here, but this is how I feel it about this verse. Joseph attains prominence. 1254. The king said, "Bring him to me so I can hire him to work for me." When he talked with him, he said, "Today you have a prominent position with us." He said, "Make me the treasurer, for I am experienced in this area and knowledgeable." 1256. We thus established Joseph on earth, ruling as he wished. We shower our mercy upon whomever we will, and we never fail to recompense the righteous. SubhanAllah. 1257. Additionally, the reward in the hereafter is even better for those who believe and lead a righteous life. Joseph's brothers came. When they entered, he recognized them, while they did not recognize him. After he provided them with their provision, he said, "Next time, bring with you your half brother. Do you not see that I give full measure and treat you generously?" So as a result of uh, that, once the dream interpretation went to the king asked to bring Joseph, and his innocence was proved, so he was no more in the jail or the prison. He said, so the king told him that, today you have a prominent position with us. I guess king really liked him, and Joseph was smart, and he could interpret dreams and advise the king about some future event. So he gave him a position. He may basically offered him a prominent position at the uh, at in his whatever kingdom or in the country. So then Joseph actually asked him to make him the treasurer. So all God is running everything. All these events are happening from the beginning. The brother scheming, throwing him in the well, him being sold to the uh, taken out by a caravan or gypsies, and they sell him in another country um, for few dirhams, and then he's at a governor house, and the incident of this claim of governor wife happened, that she tried to seduce him, but she put the blame on him. He goes to the prison for so many years. We don't know how many years exactly, and eventually he's out. His innocence is proven. He's at the king's palace now, offered a job, and then God says, we thus established Joseph on earth, ruling as he wished. We shower our mercy upon whomever we will, and we never fail to recompense the righteous. Joseph stayed righteous. He learned from his mistakes. Um, when he said that, you know, about intercession, this whole life is the our chance, or the events happen, tests happen for us to learn things, purify ourselves, have better understanding of God's system. And God says He never fails to recompense the righteous. The righteous always win. The victory belongs to the believers. No matter how other people scheme, at the end, we have to stay patient. It can happen to anyone, but we gotta stay patient, trust God, and commemorate God day and night. So now, while Joseph is working at for king as a treasurer, so Joseph's brother came as merchants. Um, they entered in the palace. He recognized them, but they did not recognize him. So whatever the way of commerce was at that time, I guess people exchanged provisions. Like if somebody has oranges, and then you give them apples, stuff like that. And so he gave them generously for whatever product they brought, and in return. And he said, next time bring with you your half brother. Do you not see that I give full measure and treat you generously? So Joseph had a plan at this time to bring his other half brother. Uh, so they were Joseph and his brother were two brothers from one one mother, and the rest of the other brothers were from another one. So they were always jealous and mistreating Joseph, as we know. They schemed against him. But now so much time has passed, and they had no clue who they were talking to, or if Joseph even survived or whatnot. So he took advantage of the moment, and he asked them, like, hey, I gave you, generously in return for whatever you brought. So in a way, he was, getting their trust. Um, so if you fail to bring him to me, you will get no share from me. You will not even come close. So now he was in a position to demand something, and gave them incentive to actually, come back again. They said, "We will negotiate with his father about him. We will surely do this." He then instructed his assistants, "Put their goods back in their bags. When they find them upon their return to their family, they may come back sooner." When they returned to their father and said, "Our father, we can no longer get any provisions unless you send our brother with us. We will take good care of him." He said, Jacob said, "Now, shall I trust you with him as I trusted you with his brother before that?" God is the best protector, and of all the merciful ones, He is the most merciful. When they opened their bags, they found their goods returned to them. They said, "Our father, what more can we ask for? Here are our goods returned to us. We can thus provide for our family, protect our brother, and receive one more camel load. This is certainly a profitable deal." So apparently, Joseph, whatever they had brought for exchange, Joseph not only paid them for that, but even returned all the goods back to them. So that was a huge incentive for them to quickly come back. He knew their psychology. SubhanAllah, God is running everything. All knowledge comes from God, and whatever Joseph was doing, it was a predetermined matter. And God knows the future, God knows the present, and all things, how they take place in life. We realize later on that things we didn't understand in the past, what was the reason behind it? SubhanAllah. Then we reflect, like, wow, probably that's why I didn't get that job, or I got this job because this was gonna happen. These two people were gonna meet and eventually get married. Things like that. Everything is planned from God. The only thing we have in our control is our free will, whether we choose God or we don't choose God, or we choose Satan. That's our free will. We exercise, but our provisions, our life, who we marry, how many kids we will have, is all destined for us. It's predestined from God. We have no control over that. He said, "I will send him with you unless you give me a solemn pledge before God that you will bring him back, unless you are utterly overwhelmed." When they gave him their solemn pledge, he said, "God is witnessing everything we say." So at that moment, hesitantly, Jacob did agree, but he knew everything in a way. But he was playing along. Um, and he made God witness for this matter, and let the half brother and the other brother of Joseph go with them. And he said, "O my sons, do not enter from one door, enter through separate doors. However, I cannot save you from anything that is predetermined by God. To God belongs all judgments. I trust in Him, and in Him shall all the trusters put their trust." SubhanAllah. So Jacob knew already, and he gave them an idea to, do not enter from one door. He told them to go separately because God had informed him um, about what was going to happen. So he accordingly had advised his kids, um, or his children, to not kids, I guess they must be grown up people now, to enter from different doors so they don't come all together, because then Joseph had to follow up his plan later on accordingly. And then he believed, and he said that, "I cannot save you from anything that is predetermined by God. Even though we have the best plan, we still know that God has the final plan for everything. Um, we can always have a B plan, but A plan is always with God. So anything, even things go our way, it's already in accordance with God's will, you know. So we must remember all that. So, and he proclaimed that to God belongs all judgments. I trust in him, and in him all the trusters shall put their trust. So no matter what, when we put our trust in God, God takes care. This is God's promise. We must submit to him wholeheartedly and always put our trust in him, no matter what the situation is. Who could be better? Who could be better supporter and a savior than God? You know, where our trust in him should be solid, not under certain circumstances, but under all circumstances, inshallah. And that's where I end this recitation, and inshallah we'll open for comments and discussions and questions, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Wake up, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Assalamu
okay.
alaikum. Thank you for the
I hope I
reading.
didn't put you guys to sleep. Nice sleep.
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Assalamualaikum
Some.
Nudrat.
Assalamu alaikum,
Assalamu
Mario.
alaikum. How are you? We
Long
have some
time no
guests
Mario.
Assalamualaikum.
arriving.
How are you doing, dear?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
Masha Allah. Assalamu alaikum. And any comments, any questions, please feel free to go.
Mm. Actually, I have a question about these verses. I'm wondering why, but the Joseph father, is that like a test or maybe like a punishment or something? I don't know about his blindness. He's blind, right?
Yeah, he turned blind when he grieved so much over Joseph. Day and
Yeah,
night he was crying, and
yeah.
oh, for sure it was a punishment too, because
That's why sometimes I'm wondering, is that punishment as a prophet or maybe it's a test?
it's a consequence.
It's
See,
consequence.
can
Okay.
yeah, it's a consequence. I'm gonna, if you allow me, then I can
Okay,
explain.
please.
According to according to God's system, we know that anything bad that happens to us is from us, right? And all good comes from God.
Okay.
What Joseph,
Mm-hmm.
Jacob, even he knew from initially in the beginning from Joseph's dream that
Mm-hmm.
everything is gonna be okay. He will be saved. He will have a prominent position um, at King's and all that. But he still loved him so much that
Yeah.
probably he became his idol. Like he cried for him day and night
Mm-hmm.
in grief that he lost his eyes. So that was God's mercy at the end, that by God's grace, God restored his vision. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and But of course, he complained a lot. We know one of the lessons through from this surah. I get it that Jacob complained a
Mhm.
lot, even knowing that God is running everything and his son is gonna be okay one day, but he had no patience.
Mm.
Yeah, so it was a consequence. If that's what somebody will not submit to God over the situation and do that, that's gonna happen, right?
Too much love will kill you.
Yeah, it can.
Yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah.
make you blind.
I see. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Nadrat.
Masha Allah.
Anyone
Nice
wait?
picture, Hario.
Oh
It's a new
yeah,
picture?
yeah. It's me and my wife.
Oh, mashallah. Very nice.
Where's everybody?
Everybody's very quiet
Very
today.
quiet today.
I think my story put them to sleep, the Quran story. Story time. Mashallah. Amazing story, though,
It's
Joseph's
study,
story.
not story. Hello, wake up, everybody.
Yeah. I know Solomon is definitely sleep, dozing off right
No, no, I was telling you I was outside. I can
now.
talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mashallah.
I think I was having connection issues, so I couldn't hear a lot of it. So no one was commenting or
Haryu had a comment
mm-hmm,
about why Jacob went blind. Was it a punishment? And
mm-hmm,
which I commented that it was a consequences of him, even knowing well that Joseph would be
mm-hmm,
fine one day, but he
mm-hmm,
complained a lot to God and cried and grieved over Joseph so much that he ended up losing his eyesight. For his love for Joseph was too much. And he missed him. Human weaknesses, no matter whether you are a messenger, prophet, children can be your weaknesses and are,
mm-hmm.
most of the time. God tells us they are your test. So that was his test, right?
Mm, yeah. We have a myth uh, in Indonesian Muslim here. If you get pregnant and you want, you willing to get a handsome or pretty baby, so you have to recite Joseph every night. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's some people believe like that. He
Some
was
people believe in that.
so
It's
good
a myth.
looking.
In,
So,
Yeah. Wow. I know. Putting too much uh, power to Joseph. Uh, just ask God, my God,
yeah.
can I have a beautiful child? I know.
yeah, I think I've heard it.
You heard that too, Solomon.
Mm.
Yeah.
So this story is really inspiring. because it shows that, no matter what people do and how much they scheme, they cannot hurt you or do anything to you against God's will. And if God plans to make you successful, if you're righteous, then no matter what people do, I mean, God's plan will ultimately take place, and He'll grant uh,
Your voice has
success
started
to
to
the
lag
people,
again, Solomon.
who
Your
follow
sound.
God's commandments.
Mhm.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Masha Allah, people can scheme, but the God is the ultimate schemer. His scheme prevails. Whatever he has planned already, no scheme can change that.
Hmm.
Alhamdulillah. And then God says, yeah,
Yeah.
you mentioned the key word
Mm.
is if you live a righteous life, as long as we're doing everything right, um, and we're following the scripture and God's
Mm.
commandments and living a righteous life, we're in God's protection. Apparently, anybody, any scheme, nothing can hurt people.
Hmm.
Those who trust in God and live a righteous life. Also, this surah, we, it, the lessons, what it talks about is that many things we see that a weakness of human being, that also seems like Jacob did love the other two more than his other sons. And, that's kind of an unfair practice too by some parents that they sometimes differentiate between their kids, and the kids can become jealous of each other. Parents have to be very equitable. This is what I feel like, like those kids were jealous for some good reason. I don't know.
Hmm.
What
Well,
do
I
you
see
think?
parents have to be equitable.
Mm.
Mm.
We cannot hear you, Solomon.
Yeah, we cannot hear. Solomon, we lost you.
It sounds like you're slurring very badly.
Yeah, lagging.
Sorry, is that Steve or?
Yes,
Oh,
Steve. Assalamu alaikum.
Salãmun Alaykum.
So, can you guys hear me?
We
No,
cannot hear you,
no.
Solomon.
We can guess what you're
It's
saying. Can you hear me? But no,
very
we can't.
lagged response. It's just dragging.
Mm. No. Uh,
Solomon, still bad.
Okay, Solomon. Finish your food first.
Actually, I was going to ask a question, but it's already been answered because my what historical knowledge, I guess, of the scriptures is terrible. So I was going to ask, is Jacob Joseph's father? But it's already been answered in the comments. So,
Sorry, can you say that again, Steve? Sorry, I missed it.
oh, um, I was going to ask a question about Jacob, but then you already answered it with your comment.
And what was that?
Just when you read this verses tonight, I realized that Joseph's father is Jacob. Is it?
Right.
That's right, eh? And which probably sounds very obvious to everybody, but I think my knowledge of scripture history is terrible, so I didn't really make that connection until tonight.
Masha Allah. Yeah, I mean, I also learned from the Quran about Jacob and his clan. 12 patriarchs, I guess these were the 12 patriarchs, right? Am I right, Solomon? That God
Yeah.
established them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you must be right, because he had 11 brothers, is it?
Yeah, 11 brothers. Um, on my comment, when I said that Jacob preferred other two over his other sons, he loved them more. So Solomon texted me, he couldn't speak. He said he thinks probably the other two sons were more righteous, and then he preferred them over the others. They were like good kids.
Oh, yeah. And maybe he just sensed that the other kids were jealous, so
Yeah, they were
then you might
jealous
favor the other
because of
the non-jealous
yeah.
kids over the jealous kids, maybe.
Mm. Plus, maybe Joseph was so good looking,
he, mu-
as we all know,
he must have been
as the world
he must have been
knows.
one good-looking dude, eh?
They
I
must
mean,
like, hey,
I would like to get a
he is
room full of
too good
women
looking.
and see if they cut their hand when I walk into the room.
Yeah, the jealousy on many levels. And maybe he was really smart too, because the God endowed him knowledge about dreams at very young age and whatnot. Yeah, and seems like Jacob also had knowledge of dreams too, because the initial dream, when Joseph spoke to Jacob about his dream, he understood the dream. You know that the 12, 11 planets and the sun and the moon prostrating in front of him. So Jacob did understand the dream, and that is when he said, "Do not tell this dream to your brothers."
Maybe it's
Oh, okay.
just guessing.
No, I don't think he's guessing. He knew what
Good
was
guess.
gonna happen, because maybe this Jacob and Joseph, they were kind of aware of the dreams. That's why even
Yeah,
maybe those brothers could even understand.
yeah, I mean, that's
Maybe it was
why
in the family. Yeah,
his father said, "Do not tell to your brother."
yeah.
So which mean it. So I mean, it doesn't mean that Jacob knows that the dream is a sign.
Yeah,
It's not.
he might.
Uh,
Yeah, he may not have known what the
yeah,
dream meant actually, but yeah, I guess that's not quite clear.
But he was afraid that this dream is very significant, that they might do something bad to him.
Yeah, that's true.
yeah. It seems like it just do some preventive action.
Right. Because he must be aware of their jealous nature
Hmm.
against Joseph anyway. So this dream was very powerful dream, like showing a prominent position of Joseph in some way.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
the dreams are, sometimes Rashad has talked about dreams in his audio, that, like dreams can be very significant sometimes.
Yeah, because to interpret the dream is a miracle of the Joseph.
Yeah, one of the miracles given to him.
And dreams must be significant in some way, because otherwise God wouldn't mention it in the Quran, right?
Yes, absolutely. Masha Allah. Yeah, it's not like, you know, because I think Rashad has talked about deja vu.
Yeah.
What happens when we sleep, this soul leaves the body. As we know that resurrection every morning happens, and we die in our sleep. The soul leaves the body and wanders who knows where, because then it can travel really somewhere, and that's why sometimes we see a place and we say, "Oh, deja vu." I've seen this before. Maybe it goes. It has no time restriction at the time. It goes in the future, and I don't know.
But even we know that it's like a deja vu, but we cannot fix or make some any corrective action.
Yeah, that's not in our control. No corrective action. But we can reflect sometimes because symbolism is very strong in dreams. Even like if you talk to a psychotherapist about your dreams,
Mhm,
many things symbolize different things, and that's like pretty much scientific.
mhm.
Um, in certain parts of
Yeah,
dreams.
sometimes I ever feel about the deja vu, but in my understanding about the dream, it's like it's time for me to remembering God. Oh God, please protect me. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what the next happen.
Right.
Um, oh, the verse where Joseph uh, asked the prison mate, to remember him at uh, at at the Lord, not God, but
Right.
the Lord. Actually, that I'm having um, that lesson. I'm also having that lesson at the moment, actually, because I'm having some difficulty at my work with my colleague. I sort of have just one colleague at my work that I work with, and I think it's human nature, or maybe the normal tendency would be to complain to my manager about my colleague. But I'm trying to restrain from doing that and just trust in God and know that God controls everything. And yeah, I've seen some signs that that's the right approach. Um, Something happened recently that I thought, wow, I didn't really expect.
We're losing you, Steve.
Oh, are you?
I can barely hear you.
Oh, truly. Okay, we'll try
Oh,
again.
now it's better.
Um, uh, Sorry, that's me. That's not the connection. um,
Oh, okay.
just about Joseph, Joseph forgetting that God controls everything, and asking his prison mate to remember him as his Lord.
Yeah, to intercede. Yeah.
And I'm also having that. I'm also sort of facing that same lesson, because I'm having some challenges at my work with my colleague, and so I'm trying very hard to remember that God controls everything, and instead of um, complaining to my boss about my colleague, I'm just leaving it up to God.
Masha Allah.
And it's interesting because the natural tendency is to complain about my boss, even like to complain and not necessarily expect any action to be taken, but just to complain anyway, or to record it as something that my colleague's done. But I'm trying to resist doing that, even that, and just trusting in God, that God controls everything, and if I'm doing what's right, then God willing, God will make the situation good for me.
Masha Allah. That's really, that's how, But if 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 this person is doing something illegal, or
No, it's not
okay,
illegal.
okay, okay.
It's just
No, I
is
mean
I
like
basically
something unethical according to work.
no,
He
not unethical, real or unethical to
just
me
being a
maybe.
personally mean or something. Okay.
Yeah, it's just I guess it just affects me,
It
and
it could be your test of your patience and trust in God. Yeah, mashallah.
yeah,
Because even
definitely,
situation. Mm-hmm.
definitely because I'm not a patient person, and
Yeah, that's me too.
and I basically work with one colleague, so in order for my work to run smoothly, we need to get along, which is a challenge at the moment. But in the past, in a different role, I've had challenges with uh, workmates. Sounds like I'm a problem, maybe. And in that situation, I did complain and create a fuss and get angry, and in the end, that didn't help me. That actually probably was to my detriment, actually. So this time, um, I'm trying very hard not to uh, not to complain to anybody, particularly my manager, and just trusting God, and God willing, if I behave correctly, then God will correct things for me.
Mashallah.
And I see some signs of that happening, actually. Like something happened a week or so back that I didn't really expect. And it's like, wow, this shows that, if you trust in God and appreciate that God controls everything, like Rashad said, that you need to appreciate, you need to know God in order to worship God alone. You need to know God and his attributes. And one of those is that God controls everything.
That's that's the main. Once that establishes, even though sometimes, and even though we know it, but the believing that at all times becomes a test. Sometimes, that a situation comes and suddenly our reaction is either we complain or object instead of submitting, right? And those are like moments when we start to learn that God is running everything. Like Rashad said, this should be your new mantra. This should be your new
Mm,
zikr. God is running everything. He said, say it all the time. You're driving, you're walking, your life will change. That is so true. That God tells us that human being is created weak and impatient. It is a human being is impatient by nature, and
mm,
patience has so much to do with submission, um, that when we understand and believe that God is running everything, we have to be patient. He has a plan. Whatever is happening is in accordance with His will. Then really life does start to change. A person like me, I used to be extremely impatient. I mean, Alhamdulillah, I have learned, I have come a long way, I think. Um, and yeah, and Because if it is our weakness, then we will be put in that situation over and over again until that weakness is gone. And that is God's mercy.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
that's
is
right.
God's
Yeah.
mercy, because we are put in test due to our weaknesses. So we can learn and reflect and purify our soul with those tests.
Mm.
Yeah, inshallah. I mean, even Jacob, like he was saying, all I do is complain to God. He knew he's complaining. So the end result was he lost his eyesight, and he complained a little too much.
Mm.
Even though he knew his son would be saved, he was not a patient man. God showed human weaknesses, and all, like throughout the Quran, we know God has identified that messengers or prophets were humans like us also. They were put through tests as well due to their weaknesses, and
Mm.
and they purified themselves and learned lessons. So all these lessons from history for us are to reflect that yes, those were even God's chosen people, but they were still human beings too, right?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, like verse 42 is amazing, really. Like uh, he said, "Remember me at your Lord," and just because of that, he spent several more years in prison. So that's really a strong lesson
Oh yes.
that we need to take. We need to really reflect on that lesson.
Yes. And from the country I am, I mean, it's supposedly a Muslim country, but there's so much intercession. There's no promotion without that, you know? Oh,
Yep.
yes. You don't get promoted because of your hard work. You get promoted if you know somebody and they intercede to the CEO or the boss or the manager. And that's how you even get a job. Imagine how far these people are from the religion of God if every step
Yeah, that's a good point,
of the
actually.
way, yeah,
Actually,
you need intercession.
that reminds me of something because my submitter friends in Singapore, uh, the husband, he's actually having some difficulties with his job in terms of his contract. His contract was running out, and normally he said he would run around and talk to the different managers in the hope of extending his contract. And his wife and sister-in-law said, maybe this time you shouldn't do that. You should just trust in God because God controls everything. And that's how I um, decided to do that with my job. Anyway, he did that, and the managers came to him and told him his contract's getting extended or renewed,
Wow,
which is
mashallah.
Oh,
amazing, right? I
it's
mean,
Subhanallah.
amazing. Subhanallah.
Wow, praise
and
God.
and and we learn from the Quran that's the way it should be. But it's it takes some effort to realize that, I think, because modern life we always try to control things, and
Absolutely.
it's sort of it's built into our DNA from modern life that we need to try and control everything. But God tells us we don't control anything.
Mm,
Praise God. Yes. Yeah. Submission is the name of letting go. God
mm,
says, did I not unburden from the burden you were carrying, the load you were carrying? So
Mm,
I remember before becoming a submitter, I thought, if I don't do this, this will happen. Now, if I don't do, all the time there was so much burden on my back. Then after
mm,
submission, this sense of freedom, I just cannot describe it. That was something lacking so much in me because I was
mm,
all the time I was worried, all the time about this, about finances, about the future, about blah blah, and
mm,
then suddenly you just understand No, no, no. There's nothing in your control. You just let it go. You
Yeah, I
do
think
our
I'm
due
slowly
diligence, live a
realizing that
righteous
too.
life, and that's all we can do.
Mm. Actually, I went to the conference in Tucson in the last week was it?
Right.
And and some submitters invited me to their place in Sacramento, and I misunderstood and thought that they were driving back from Tucson to Sacramento. So I confidently went ahead and cancelled my flight from
Oh no.
Tucson, Tucson back to LA. And then the next morning, I was in the foyer talking to another submitter, telling him, I cancelled my flight. I'm going to drive back. And then he said, I don't think they drove here. And then we were laughing. I realized I
Really?
cancelled my flight.
Oh no.
And so from that point on in my trip
Subhanallah.
in the US, I always needed to book a flight or book a train. And it was always sort of a rush because, you're busy with the conference, and then I'm on holiday. So I'm, busy with other things. But in the end, I decided not to panic too much about it and just book these planes and trains when I had the time, and not get too anxious about it, because at the end of the day, even if I booked as soon as I realized I needed to, at the end of the day, God is going to control which plane or train I catch. So instead of getting anxious about it and stressing too much about it, um, just let God control it. And that doesn't mean I should sit on the couch and do nothing, but it does mean that I shouldn't get anxious about it, because at the end of the day, if I
True.
book straight away, God might not want me to catch that flight, and maybe I'll get to the airport late, or maybe the flight gets cancelled or something. So, you know, um, it really was a release, or stress relief for me. When you appreciate that God controls everything, and you do what you can, but you don't need to get anxious and stress out about things so much. God willing.
Yeah, mashallah. That reminds me, one of the Tucson conference I went to. I had the I had booked my flight because it was cheaper from here, Toronto to Phoenix, and then I
Yeah,
rented a car and to Tucson and then back. So
yeah.
when I was coming back, I returned my car, and I don't know. In my mind, I was thinking it is a domestic flight, so I have,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
That's easy to do that. I've done things like that too.
That I was supposed to be there. It was not a domestic flight. I had to come to Canada, and I was supposed to be there 2 hours early, and I was only 1 hour, and gates were closed and everything. I now I learned a big lesson because I failed that test. That God is running everything. I started to cry so hard that I threw a tantrum right at the airport. But
Yeah.
I was afraid that I am being punished for something instead of thinking it can be a test. So
Mm,
I'm like, then I made some more foolish decisions right in that anguish, and I paid the price later on quite a bit,
mm,
So I remember I failed that test miserably, and I
mm,
have to remember all the time that God is running everything.
mm.
Yeah, we learn the hard way sometimes. Not
But it's
sometimes.
good
I
that
learn
it's,
always. I learn the hard way always.
but it's good that you learned a lesson. Some people wouldn't recognize the lesson. So that's good. Praise God.
So that's whenever when we don't, then the test comes back again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does. Until we rid of whatever the weakness is. That's God's mercy, though, mashallah. Because He wants us to be purified. Yeah.
That maybe explains my life in one sentence.
You know how Rashad says in his video that, the fire and burning your hand in it, you
Mm,
can use it or burn your hand in it, and then learn the lesson. I, I am one of those people. My hand needs to be burned in order to be burned. May God forgive me, and I don't burn my hand in the future. But I've done that a lot. Yeah.
mm,
Because God's system is perfect. God has identified, you do this, this is the consequence. It's His mercy that He has given us this book with all the laws, all the commandments, His system. Everything which bad happens to us is from us. So here's the
mm.
fire. It can burn you, or you know what to do with it. Yeah, and then we step into the fire sometimes, knowingly. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
that's how we humans are. Haryo, can you do me a favor? Can you wake up Solomon and Ahmed?
Ahmed, wake up!
These two are sleeping today for sure.
I'm here, I'm listening, but I can't talk.
Oh,
Why?
we
You
want
should
you to
talk.
talk, Ahmed. Come on. We're keeping up the, conversation going, but for how long? We need more people awake, inshallah.
Don't feel so sad because your mother forget to recite Joseph when you were a child, Ahmed. So just speak up.
I'm gonna ask my mother if she did that.
Mashallah, Haryo's laughter is contagious. Always coming from the heart so much. Happy person, praise God. Well, I guess if, no more questions or comments, then we can
Mhm.
wrap up, God willing.
Yeah, what happened to Solomon's connection? Because I've got some messages from him. So clearly he's given up trying to connect.
Solomon, I think is we are not able to hear him, right?
Yeah.
Technical issues today.
Is it live in YouTube? No?
Yeah, we're still live on YouTube. That's why I'm saying if there are no more comments, we can
Yeah.
wrap up. Solomon, can you type us something if we are ending, please? Ahmad, can you end the stream? God willing. Hello?
Solomon needs to send the link.
Well, Salãmun is not responding.
You're so quiet today, Ahmed.
I'm gonna send Salãmun text, inshallah.
Anyway, Steve, you live in Australia or in New Zealand?
Currently, I'm in Australia, in Sydney, but I'm a
Oh,
New
in
Zealand.
Sydney.
I'm a New Zealander.
Oh, okay. Maybe sometimes
Whereabouts?
we can. I'm in Indonesia.
Oh
We're
wow.
neighbor.
Yeah.
The
Whereabouts in
Pacific.
Indonesia? In Jakarta. Whereabouts in Indonesia?
Oh, what do you mean?
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
in Bandung.
Which?
In
Oh,
Bandung.
okay.
Oh, you know Indonesia a lot?
Not really, but I've heard of that place, but I'm not quite sure where it is.
In West Java, in
Uh,
Bandung.
oh, okay. My uncle recently moved to Indonesia.
Where?
He from Singapore. He's moved to Indonesia.
Oh, where did he live?
It's a good question. Uh, I'm trying to recall. I think it must be. I can't remember the town off the top of my head, but it's maybe a few hours outside of Jakarta, maybe
Oh,
to the
okay.
east of Jakarta, maybe.
Oh, it's still in Jakarta.
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
that uncle, he got married quite late in life, and he married an
Mm-hmm.
Indonesian, and then he's retired now, so he's sort of sold his place in Singapore and moved to Indonesia.
Indonesia. I plan to move here too, Steve.
Yeah, never know. You never know.
Never know.
Well, it sounds like you could have a good life in Indonesia. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
from what my mother visited my uncle, and it sounds like it's got a
Mm-hmm.
nice life over there. So, praise God.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've been to Indonesia actually. Have I been?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I haven't. I don't think I've been to Indonesia.
Mm-hmm. You ever come here
No, I
several
don't think
times?
so. I don't.
Oh, you never?
I'm trying to recall. I don't think so. I've been to. I'm just trying to think, even if I've transited in Indonesia, but I don't think so.
You
Yeah,
even
sorry.
even in Bali?
Nah, never. Haven't been to Bali even. No,
Oh.
actually, a friend of mine. Um,
Uh-huh.
she's an old friend from Melbourne. She's Indonesian, and she's back in Indonesia. She has a house in Bali, and she actually invited me. She said, "You can come and stay at my house in Bali," which she rents out. She said, "You can stay there
Mm.
as long as you want. You just got to figure out how to make a living." But she said I
I'm
could stay
going
in her house
to
in
turn
Bali.
off the stream.
Okay, please, Ahmed.
What? What? When is the next study?
You should know. It's
I'm not sure.
Wednesday,
I-
Thursday.
Yeah, Wednesday. Is Nudrat back?
Yeah, I got cut off, but I
Okay.
called Solomon by phone
Okay.
and sent him the message to end the stream, and he said he's sending you the link.
Yeah. So
You
I'm
got
pending it now. Any
Okay.
final words?
Well, inshallah, we'll have this Quran study on next Wednesday, God willing, at 6 p.m. Pacific time and 9 p.m. Eastern time in North America. So until then, have a
Inshallah.
nice weekend, inshallah.
Ciao.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu
Alaikum
alaikum.
salam. Assalamu
Okay.
alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.